All right, so here are our notes for the 8th set of Math of Personal Finance Term 1. So we're almost to the end, and today we're talking about travel expenses. So a couple of terms we need to understand today. We're going to talk about frequency, relative frequency, cumulative frequency, relative cumulative frequency, and percentile rank. So frequency, abbreviation for that is just going to be F. We'll call frequency F, and this is the number of times something happens. So frequency is just how frequent, how often that thing occurs. Relative frequency, abbreviation for that, I'll go RELF, relative frequency, and this is your frequency divided by the total. So it's going to be a fraction. You'll take your frequency, the number of times something happens, and divide it by the total number of things. Cumulative frequency, abbreviation there would be CUMF. These are long words. It's kind of nice to be able to abbreviate them sometimes. And cumulative frequency is the frequency at and before. And that'll make a little bit more sense when we do some examples, but it's going to be everything at that point and everything under it, everything that already happened. And you'll see it more in some examples. Relative cumulative frequency, kind of like relative frequency, it's going to be your cumulative frequency divided by the total. And then a percentile rank is going to be your percent at or below that number. So for instance, like percentile rank, like sometimes it'll say like they're in the 99th percentile, and that means that 99% of people are that value or lower. And let's look at an example, see if we can make sense of this. So the first example, we're just going to fill out the table. We want to know how many of the trips listed in the summer travel table were less than 1,000 miles. So we'll fill out the table first, and then we'll come back and answer that question. Okay, so right here, this is long distance trips measured in miles. So M right here is between 50 and 250. So that means that 512,460,000 trips were between 50 and 250 miles. In the other case, 72,270,000 trips were between 250 and 500 miles. And so forth. So 38,850,000 were between 501,000, and then the other ones were anything over 1,000, so very long distance trips. Okay, so we're going to start by filling out the cumulative frequency. So reminder, cumulative frequency is the frequency at or before. So for the first one, the cumulative frequency is going to be just our frequency. Oh, maybe I should point that out too. This column right here is our frequency, because this many trips are happening this amount. This many trips are happening in this range. This many in this range, and this many in this range. So they gave us the frequency already. Now the cumulative frequency for the first one is just going to stay the same. It's going to be that 512,460,000. But for the next one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 72,270,000 and I'm going to add the one before it, the 512,460,000. Now when I add them together, I'll get 584,730,000. That's the cumulative frequency at that point. Now the next one, cumulative frequency at or before. So what I'm going to do is add actually kind of pointed to the wrong number here. I'm going to add this value plus the 38,850,000. So if I add this, these are really big numbers. Then I will get 623,580,000. And then the last one, we'll take this value and add it on. And we will get 656,430,000. Now, really the only part you have to write down are those numbers I wrote in green right there in that cumulative frequency column. The rest was just so you could see where the numbers are coming. But again, cumulative frequency, you just take with the frequency at or before. So it's cumulating, you're adding more and more on. Now, relative frequency, remember, is the frequency divided by the total. Okay, so here's my frequency. We're going to take 512,460,000 divided by the total. Now the total, they didn't tell us what the total was. The total would be if I added all of these values together. And I actually already did that. That was that cumulative frequency at the very end. So I will divide by that 656,430,000, and my my relative frequency for the first set of trips between 50 and 250 miles would be 0.781. And you could keep that as just like 0.781, or you could write it as 78.1%. Okay, so 78.1% of the trips were in that 50 to 250 mile range. The next set, okay, make sure you realize for relative frequency, I'm taking the regular frequency, the 72,270,000, and dividing it by that total, which is still the same number. When you divide those, I get 0.110, which would be 11%. So 11% of trips were from 250 to 500 miles. Next one, take your frequency, 38,850,000, divide it by the total, and I got 0.059, so that would be 5.9%. 5.9% of trips would be 500 to 1,000 miles. Last one, take your frequency, come on thing, and divide it by your total. And that gives me 0.050, which would be 5%. So 5% were in that range. Okay, now if I added all of these percents together, you should get 100%. You might be a tiny bit off just because there is some rounding, but it should add up to 100. Okay, so we filled out the table. Check. Now, how many of the trips listed in the summer table were less than 1,000 miles? Okay, less than 1,000 miles, that's the part we're answering. Okay, here's 1,000 miles, right? And it could be anything less than that. So it could also be 250 to 500 miles. It could also be 50 to 250 miles. All three of those fall into that category, right, of trips that were less than 1,000 miles. Now, there were this many in the first range, this many in the second range, and this many in the third range. If I add all three of those numbers together, I get this right here. That would be my answer. There were 623,580,000 trips that were less than 1,000 miles. Okay, so after you fill out the table, that should help you to be able to answer some questions about it. Next question says, how many trips less than 500 miles in length were taken using the chart above? So less than 500 miles in length. Let's see, what color could I use here? Well, let's go pink. Okay, less than 500 miles. Okay, so now I'm looking at these ones, right? Those were less than 500 miles. These ones were as well. So if I add this number and this number, wow, this is getting pretty colorful, I would get this number right here. 584,730,000 satisfy that stipulation, less than 500 miles in length. And next problem says, what is the percentage of trips taken that were 250 miles or more and less than 500 miles? Okay, let's look at that. 250 miles or more and less than 500 miles. What part is talking about that? Oh, that's right here. This is where I'm looking. What is the percentage of trips that were taken? Percent, here we go. 11% of trips taken fall in that range. Okay, I think we're done with that table, done with that big example. Let's look at another situation. Example 4 says the flight travel website reported the following airfare booking expenses for the week of July 4th. So these are our different airplane costs, like ticket costs in the first column. The second column is the number of bookings, how often that happened. So this is our frequency. The relative frequency, let's go ahead and find that. So remember, relative frequency is frequency divided by total. Okay, so this is going to be 70 divided by, oh, what's our total? We don't know. Let's find it. Total equals, add them all together, right? So 70 plus 120, 310, 282, 168, 150, 136, 80, 96, 22. If you add all those together, we'll get 1,434. That's what we're going to be dividing by. Okay, so 70 divided by 1,434 gives me 0.049, which we could write as a percent, right? That would be 4.9%. Next one would be 120 over 1,434, and that gives me 0.084, so 8.4%. 310 divided by that total would be 0.216, which could be 21.6%. Next one, 282 divided by the total is 0.197, 19.7%. The next one would be 168 divided by the total, which is 0.117 or 11.7%. 150 divided by that total, 1,434, would be 0.105 or 10.5%. 136 divided by the total is 0.095. That's 9.5%. 80 divided by 1,434 is 0.056, 5.6%. 96 divided by 1,434 is 0.067, so 6.7%. And last one, 22 divided by 1434 is 0.015. So that'd be 1.5%. Whew. Seems like a lot of work, but it's just calculating. Not too difficult. Okay, so let's answer this question. What proportion of the tickets sold had a cost greater than or equal to $400 and less than or equal to $499? Okay, let's look at which part is that talking about. Right here. Greater than or equal to $400 and less than or equal to $499. What proportion of the tickets sold had that cost? And it tells me to round to the nearest thousandth. So I'm looking at these numbers right here. You could write 0.197 or 19.7%. 19.7% of the tickets fell in that range. That's a pretty big chunk. Next question, what percent of the total number of bookings fall within the range 700 to 899? Okay, so these ones right here are 700 to 799. 800 to 899 also fall in that range. So I need both of these. So I need 9.5% and 5.6%. If you add those together, you would get 15.1%. And that would be our answers. 15.1% were between 700 and 899. Okay, looks like that's it for today. Go ahead and practice.